So now it's your turn. Hopefully the coffee's kicked in by now and you're ready with all your questions. I think we have a roving microphone. 2 roving microphones. Excellent. Okay. So we'll throw it open for questions. What I'd like you to do is to stand up, give your name, the company you represent, and then just fire away. So as I said at the top, don't be shy. It's all about interactivity. Let's hear your questions.
Hi there, I'm Sean Tomlinson from Stereo. I'd just like to ask the guys on the panel, each of you, what do you think for your social media programs is the one thing that has really made a difference to its success?
Do you want to go first there, Paul?
I'm not sure I do. For me, the standout success. If I'm honest, when we went into this, I perhaps perceived this being an opportunity as far as brand advocacy and acquisition was concerned. Where I am at the moment, and I have been for the last 2 years, is how it supplements our customer service, and that's what it does. It supplements. We're not trying to transition or anything. It's just a need that's there. And that perhaps has been a slight surprise to me. It's working so well, I'm reticent to do campaigns and stuff like that because I think actually there's so much demand for this. So, and that has been the success that's why we're continuing to invest and to employ and have people engage with this particular media.
I think for us, I think the business realising that this is no longer a fad, and it's not just something that kids do. These are new channels, and as a result of that, dedicating proper budget to it. So we've got a new global head of digital based in the US now, who's ex-Citibank, mobile, social, kind of, a big hitter, who's kind of driving this forward for us now, which I think, so it's budget and resource and just kind of throwing themselves behind it.
I think for us it's probably the cross-functional nature of the approach that we take. So we've got some fairly senior stakeholders who sit on the committee, again, big hitters, and I think that they completely understand the benefits of social media. So it's not kind of one specialist team in the digital arena just suggesting something wacky and weird. It's something that I think across the business, some of the more senior members of the team fully understand. So I think that's helped us a lot.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman at the back.
Hi, good morning. Dominic Probyn, Baringa Partners. My question is really about your internal customers, probably outside of the marketing and communication space. How do they use the data that you generate, and how do they respond when you propose changes to the business? And I'm thinking in terms of products and processes, so I can understand how the marketing team might respond when you suggest let's not use Britons as a word or phrase, but how do other areas of the business respond when you suggest that maybe a product should change or a process?
Is that question directed to?
I think it's particularly relevant to LV and Santander.
Okay. Well, shall I ask Russell to go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, I know I keep coming back to it, but I think the joint ownership piece helps a lot there, because whilst we are responsible for generating the reports, generating the insight, informing the business of what's being said in the key areas and by key influencers, we don't take that and then say, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's very much a suggestion almost. So we outsource our monitoring and reporting. And part of the agency's remit is to make strategic suggestions off the back of what they're finding out. But it's not kind of you must do this. Again, it's kind of the joint ownership aspect helps. It's here's some more data, and to be honest, they tend to lap it up, and they will make changes where necessary and where appropriate, but not always. Does that answer the question?
Well, I think it sort of feeds into the question of how how the measurability and the content of the data. Do you think that you could use the data in such a way that it would develop into a business case to change something? I'm thinking in terms of...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree with what Russell said, and being Procore, what we've done is we've certainly found the data's being used in our operations, certainly service teams, and been able to share the insights, the data, what level of complaints we're getting into common themes. Again, it does supplement, I use that word again, with chat and other things. It's just another source of information. There is an opportunity in the insurance world for, and we're not, I'm not going to sit here and say that we do this to the full extent, but as far as financial crime is concerned, there are opportunities there to, as far as when claims are being made, actually prevention as well of telling customers, don't tell people on Facebook you're going on holiday for 2 weeks and your house is left empty. That's kind of an invitation for burglar bill. So there's some proactive things we can do. There's some reactive things we do. I mentioned before about data being all important. I don't think we've maximised the potential of this. In truth, I think we're finding our way. I mean, speak on behalf of LV. We are linking up with operations. We're both. All our teams are learning. I can see further opportunities where we need to exploit this further. But for me, one of the things from an insurance perspective, our claims ratio is our crown jewels, keeping that as low as possible. There is a great opportunity to help prevent or actually potentially repudiate claims if there's certain information via social networks that you know of that you can say, well, I don't think that's quite legitimate. So yes, there's definitely opportunities there.
This gentleman down here was next.
Hi, John Dorobic from Saga. My question is probably mostly for Paul and Russell. In a situation where you obviously want to cover yourself in terms of your marketing and make sure you get the message across correctly the whole time, but in a social context where you need to reply quickly, how have you guys managed to get the balance right between getting sign-offs from all the different areas and all the different levels with responding quickly?
Paul, your turn.
Yeah, good question. Truth of it is, the upfront work of buying the relevant people in, compliance, PR, the two that spring to mind in that particular case. We brought them in from the outset, and I guess from a compliance legal perspective, there's an element of trust that we have the right people to respond. It's all auditable, people can check. So retrospectively they can check, but there's an element of trust that you're going to do the right things at the right time. With regards to PR type things, we will sort of work with our external comms teams if we've got something that's of a sensitive nature, rather than my team, for example, responding. We will go to our external comms and say, how do you want us to handle this? But I think it's fair to say, whilst they probably don't explicitly have someone on point, they're all quite it's well socialised, excuse the pun, amongst that particular team, and we can go to almost anyone and say it's come via Twitter or it's come via Facebook. We want to get back to them within a reasonable time frame. How do you want us to respond? So it's that collaboration, as I said before. It's buying people in. They've got skin in the game. They understand what you're trying to do, and then they need to organise themselves to accommodate the new channel. And generally speaking, I think we do respond in a. I'm looking at Nick because he runs the social media part. I would like to think we do respond in a fairly swift manner.
Yeah, Paul, I was just going to add something to that. So within my role at LV, I actually deal with the day-to-day tweets and actually getting them out to the people. We're just very clear on what we can and can't say. I think that's very important. We obviously can't talk about a person's policy, their claim, their personal details, because we don't know whether or not they are who they say they are. There's no validation. So I think what's very important is we say, this can sound awful, we say as little as possible on those channels. We try to take people off the channels so that we can actually speak to them through the correct channels and actually get to the root of who they are validate what they're saying, get them speaking to the right people. So I think it's probably fair to say there's very little product information we'd put up on our channels. Certainly we can't even acknowledge that that person is a customer of ours. So it's a case of, hear what you're saying, let's talk about it. And that's an approach that our PR and compliance people like because, as I say, it doesn't actually put us at any risk at all because the conversation is happening offline. And even then when someone comes back and says, no, I want to talk about this on a public forum, we just have to say, hear what you're saying, but we won't and we can't do this in a public place. So I think they trust us as to what we can and can't say. We also can trust them that if we need to go to them in an emergency and say, look, can you drop everything and give us a view on this? They will do so because they get social media and they know it doesn't have to join this queue of 50 other complaints that are just going through the process. Not that we ever have 50
I was
complaints.
going to say, not that we have 50.
One or two. Oops, faux pas.
I think that's crucial from our point of view. The groundwork that you do up front, the guidelines that you set and the parameters that you put in place enable you to say certain things immediately and up front. So it might be a short form version of your FAQs in many cases. So there's certain things you can respond to immediately. For the other things that might take longer, where you might need to go to a specialist within the business, I think what's important is that you manage expectations. So some sort of response initially to say that we're looking into this and we'll get back to you is important. So I think it's a mixture of working out what you can respond to immediately, but then also managing expectations if you're going to take it out of that channel and contact them separately.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Question over there.
Thanks. My name is Remke Nuiteboom from Atos for Financial Services and the Zero Email program of Atos. I have a question for both banking and insurance side. What do you do with the social profiles and the social context of the customer in terms of cross-selling, upselling, loyalty? Because I haven't heard that being addressed in these speeches. Yeah? And this is for me the real gold. Yeah?
I can go first because honestly at the moment we don't do anything. So are you talking sort of social CRM and using that data to then sell more intelligently and deliver more tailored messages?
Certainly it's related to a big data strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for us, to be honest, that's phase 2. It's something that's on the agenda and we understand the potential power in that, but it's not something that we've mastered yet. And I'm not sure if you guys have as yet, but it's certainly a phase 2 thing for us.
So what is stopping you for doing that right now?
I think probably one, a lack of budget and time to focus on that. I think we've prioritised with social media. So with that, I don't think it's any secret that we've struggled with our service reputation. So for us at Santander, the most important thing for us is to sort customer service out first. So I think it's about kind of, prioritising what you can and can't focus on. Social CRM is a beast when you have such a huge customer base as we do. So it's something that we've recognised is important, but not before we've tackled some of the core things for us.
And Kevin, I know your world is a little different to retail banking, but does that question resonate in your strategy at all?
Yeah, well, I've sort of been at a couple of roundtables and kind of discussions like this recently, where I think there's so much data now that's available, from off the back of all the kind of the social networking that people are doing, and then the social media marketing that we're all doing. That the next big challenge for businesses, not just in financial services, but in the world generally, are making sense of that data, and then pulling it into the business. And, as you said, if someone's got a life event that they're talking about on Facebook and they've given you permission to kind of talk to them through Facebook, and they're just announcing the birth of a child, how do you intelligently go to them and say, okay, would you like to increase your kind of life insurance on the basis that, you've got an extra, another dependent now. So, and these are things that certainly resonate with me. I mean, I would love to be marketed to in that way for people to kind of, very much permission based, but I think there are lots of operational issues we need to get through. So it's making sense of the data. It's all of the kind of the compliance stuff you need to deal with around doing that. And it's a challenge, and I was at a round table last week with a bunch of guys from a company called Fresh Networks, and they were talking about companies like BT and MasterCard, I think, are another one who they give an example of, who are developing really sophisticated social CRM systems whereby they can predict things that are happening, life events, you know, through spending patterns on your credit card, you know, whether or not you're a mobile phone operators who can, from the patterns of your mobile phone use, can determine your likelihood to leave their network, you know, and we almost, I think we're moving to a phase now where we have all this data. The challenge for us all is making sense of it and then using that for marketing purposes.
Okay. And Paul, your strategy seems to be very, very focused on customer service, but how do LV approach this sort of cross-sell CRM piece?
Yeah, I've got to be honest, it's much the same story. We haven't... Yeah, we just haven't exploited that. We're very conscious that it is an opportunity and something we would like to look at. Yep, question of investment and priorities, basically, but very aware. Fun enough, we work with Fresh Networks. They worked with us back in 2009 on the original strategy, and the likes of Experian and those guys we talk to and we hear about, and you know, the hypothesis, you know, which is what a lot of it is, kind of works, resonates with me incredibly well. I can see the potential. I've mentioned financial crime and all these things, and leveraging, you know, cross-sell, upsell capabilities. It seems theoretically entirely possible. We just haven't done it. So there's no reason why we haven't done it other than priority and investment.
Okay, time for another 2 or 3 questions. This gentleman down here.
Good morning, James Sharon-Smith from Oliver Wyman. Got a question for the panel in terms of which industries you look to outside of financial services for best practice in social media.
Kevin, do you want to start with that one?
I mean, all of them really. You know, I mean, I've given lots of presentations to the business over the last 12 months about lots of kind of stunts that people have done in kind of Liverpool Street Station, or you know, anything that kind of I can use to stimulate people to think about the ways that we can be using social media. Some of the campaigns that I've used to give examples have been the Aviva Healthy Cheer, which again is financial services, but something I thought that worked really well. It was quite an innovative thing that they did. I mean, other marketing campaigns that I really like, I think American Express, sorry, I'm talking about financial services, I know you've asked out for outside, but American Express have done this thing in the US recently whereby you connect your Twitter account to your Amex Twitter feed, and you can get offers. So yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for inspiration outside, you know, the financial services industry. But what tends to happen is you bring it into the business, you look at it, and you kind of go, well, we could never do that because, you know, compliance will step in, and kind of the life gets sucked out of you very quickly.
And Russell, you talked about having a best practice or a social media committee within Santander where you're sharing best practice between different geographies. Do you look outside of that, in that context, to look at other best practice organisations?
Yeah, and I think it depends which activity you're looking at. So from a service point of view, we took a hard look at British Gas. They have similar issues to us on the customer services side, so that was something that helped us in that area. But then in other areas of social media, we looked to totally different verticals. So we looked a lot at what Oakley were doing with their sponsorship of Rory McIlroy, and they do some fantastic stuff on that front. From a reputational risk point of view, we also looked at some work that Renault were doing. So they had a terrible reputation online and a lot of negative comment. And by implementing a Twitter strategy, they were able to reduce that significantly. So I think, yeah, in the same way that we look at other regions, we do look at other industries as well, and just pick and choose.
Mm-hmm. Paul?
Yes, impressed by, I'm just trying to think of some names, but I will start in our industry. Allstate Insurance is one back in 2009 in the US that I used to always look to. You know, Geico, Progressive are usually the names that come up, but Allstate Insurance are particularly good at social media. Outside of the industry, the FMCGs, retailers have done some great stuff. Starbucks is a bit of a chestnut, but they've got something like 36 million fans, followers. done some really great stuff. The crowdsourcing, and the reason we got leather settees in Starbucks is by social media. That's what people demanded. That's what they did. They responded. Burger King, McDonald's spring to mind. They've done some great campaigns, and again, doing really well. Tic Tac, strange. Go to Tic Tac, really good, really good. Got some great blipper campaigns, and they've sort of threaded that through to their social media and really brought people together. So those would be the sort of examples that I look at. But do we keep an eye out as to what people are doing? Yeah, absolutely. Much like Kevin said, sometimes you bring it back and you think, it's pretty genius, but I don't think I can relate it back to financial services or to our product. And that's the trick, is you want something that's, with us, we're very, I think as an industry, it tends to be more functional. It has to serve a purpose. With a retailer, it's just entertainment, it's engagement. You can be something as wacky as you want just to try it and to get some attention. Financial services, we tend to be much more cautious. We want it to serve a purpose. We always do have a strategy and an end goal in mind. I'm not saying the retailers don't necessarily, but they're more prepared to take a chance. But very entertaining, I have to say, the way that they do it, and absolutely lessons can be learned from some of these guys.
Excellent. Okay, guys, I think we've got time just for one more question. How about this chap in the middle, white shirt, blue tie?
John Lawrence from Lawrence Somerset. I wonder what your latest thinking is about how you manage social media in the context of a third party. So a broker, an IFA, an employer in a pension context. How are you trying to kind of create some sort of triangular thing where you're communicating with both of them, or how does that work?
Kevin, can I ask you to start with that?
I think what we're doing, and this kind of ties back into the last question, is we're trying to make sure that whenever we're rolling out our social media channels, for example, Twitter accounts, they'll be segmented by the audience. So, for example, we'll have a BlackRock UK Investors, BlackRock UK Advisors sort of Twitter handle whereby we'll be talking directly to that particular audience. So again, I think we're keen not to have a one-size-fits-all approach, and we're keen to use these channels and to segment them in the way we would with other kind of bits of marketing information we're pushing out the door. Again, we are aware of half a dozen IFAs who are very active. They're the early adopters of Twitter, and they're kind of and again, we want to engage with those guys and leverage their connections and their networks in the same way that hopefully we can kind of work with those guys. They can work with us and so yeah. I mean, it's still early stages for us, but we have going back to best practice. If you go to the ft.com social media hub, I think it's a great example of what we want to try and do later this year. But ft.com have got like 50 different Twitter handles that they use, for example, whereby they're segmenting. There's a Twitter handle for FT Weekend, there's one for Alphaville, and I think we're going to follow a similar sort of approach whereby we are, segmenting our audience and using the social media channels to talk to those guys directly.
Yeah, I think honestly it's not something that we've taken a deep look at yet, but I think similar principles would apply. I think on the Abbey for Intermediaries side, which is a brand we still have, we do have quite a lot of good content. We have a certain reputation for the provision of information in certain areas there. So I think where we have good content and where we have good reputations, we should look to leverage that through any of the channels that we have. But again, I think that will start to take shape as our reporting has a look at where the key influencers are in those markets. And it might be a case of taking our content to them in these instances rather than looking to create something from scratch. But yeah, early days, if I'm honest.
Cool. Yeah, I think a bit of an excuse would be that, as Kevin said, maybe the IFAs and brokers have been a little bit slow to wake up to this, but they are waking up. I know. I mean, Life. You've got IFA Life. You've got some IFAs out there which are looking at it. I know some of the GI brokers are starting to take onto this, and in truth, we haven't. It's perverse, really, because you've got a warm, receptive audience there. I mean, we've done quite well in the B2C environment where they engage with you maybe once a year, but we're not engaging with our professional network that work with us on a daily basis. Surely they'd be easier to collaborate and work with. So it does strike me as slightly odd that we haven't done that. But similar to Russell, I'd say we haven't, we would like to, but we haven't done anything as yet. But again, this does tend to be an obvious opportunity.